this is so fascinating to think about the air signs in particular as being signs of reason. It's like they're signs of intelligence, but do we assume the intelligence is human? Because I feel like we're
Oh,
entering a
wow.
time
Yeah,
also
that's true.
where it's going to be artificial intelligence, and then the next tier of artificial intelligence where they're outwitting us, and there will be a world order. And
Yeah. Will it be robots?
will it be robots?
Hello and welcome. This is Down to Astro. I'm your host, Chani Nicholas.
I'm Thea Anderson.
And I'm Eliza Robertson.
In this podcast, we like to talk about what we talk about in the group chat astrologically as things go down in the world and we see the astrology playing out in real time. So we're going to both look back at what just happened, also comment on what's happening right now, and also talk a little bit about what is coming up.
Yeah. So since we last spoke, we had Jupiter enter Cancer, which is the astrology most astrologers have been low-key hanging all of our hopes on for 2025. Jupiter loves to be in Cancer because this is its sign of exaltation. This is like the one good news of the year, not to be Debbie Downer, but it's at least the most optimistic of all the transits, I would say. But it started with a bit of a womp womp because as shortly after Jupiter entered Cancer, it bumped into a square from Saturn, who's the granddaddy of like downers and restriction and fear and other things like that, limits. But since then, also we've had the summer solstice, so it's officially our hot girl summer. It's super hot here
Very
in Montreal.
hot where we are.
I think everywhere where we are, it is beyond hot.
Yeah.
So how's it going for you two? Has Jupiter brought you any gifts?
Well, last week we had a phenomenal week at the company because we had our first ever CHANI Pop-Up, which was mind-blowing. It was like beyond our wildest dreams. It was lining up of people like for blocks. Like apparently stores were getting mad at the company who helped us run the whole thing because they were like, why is everybody blocking our doorway? So I just want to say thank you so much to everybody that came out in the New York heat, in the New York summer rain. People were lined up at like 8 a.m. We didn't open until 11. People lined up in the rain at 8 a.m. It was bananas. And I got to meet so many people. I got to give a million hugs. I got to hear so many stories from everybody. And it was really like truly incredible. I do a lot of work in a silo. I do a lot of work in a studio. I do a lot of work alone. And so when I have those moments of meeting everybody in real life, especially in that kind of like en masse situation, like the first day I walked in, I stood at the front of the pop-up, and for 3 hours, I didn't even take a beat. It was just saying hi to person after person after person. So it was like this huge flood. Like Jupiter is, I think especially when it's exalted, it promotes a sense of faith and hope, but also like a goodwill. And I just felt such a connection. I felt such an outpouring of love and support. And people were like, oh my God, everybody in line is so amazing. And everybody like met new friends in line and got to experience each other as well. So because we're all, interfacing with an app or online or on social media, and it can be challenging to remember that there's like actual humans involved in everything. So people got to meet each other. I got to meet a million people. And the most amazing thing was walking into the pop-up at the beginning and seeing our art like IRL on a building. We painted a building our like lavender purple, put the art everywhere. And it was so moving. Like I wanted to cry that the things that are like online and in our phone were real and like up and made manifest in such a physical way.
Mm-hmm.
There's something so different about experiencing your work physically. Like when, I don't know how you feel about this, Eliza, but like when I published a book, it was like, oh my God, it's so different to have it in your hands than like have things online. It's like a whole different vibe. So there was that was over the course of the weekend. Before that, we had a dinner in the space that was incredible. A whole bunch of people came and we got to feed people and give them flowers. And then we also had an event for 150 activists and artists in New York. And we talked about the astrology of the moment. We talked about the astrology of the year. We talked about what we're living through and why it feels so eerily familiar, and the themes that we're in and the cycles that we're in, which is what we'll talk about on this episode. But that was also amazing. So I just had this week, like the first week of Jupiter in Cancer, or the second, whatever, the first, couple of weeks of Jupiter in Cancer have been, by our own doing, overwhelmingly amazing. And, against the backdrop of a world on fire, there was so much love and so much beauty and so much connection and so much sweetness and so much gratitude. Like I just felt so much gratitude for people had been with me since like 2013, like before I had an editor. I like apologized to so many people, like, oh my God, thank you for sticking with me through not having anybody to help me curate my own voice and, all the things. So it was beyond. Our team just put on the most amazing events. So shout out to everybody that worked on that, and from the marketing team, the design team, copy team. Like it was overwhelmingly beautiful. So
I
that's
love
what I
that
got to do.
you named 2013 too as like a seed moment, because
Yes.
this is the Jupiter return of that
I know.
time.
Yes, it is.
Not lost on you.
Yeah. So Jupiter was in Cancer the last time from 2013 to 2014. And at the end of 2014, Sonia and I met. And we really, like, I had a business before we met, but she and I came together, and then everything started to really explode. So this is our Jupiter return of us meeting. And so it was so special to do this whole week of offerings to the public and just to like open ourselves up, which I do think is another signification of how Jupiter works, or is Jupiter's magic. I think like the more you open up and the more you say like, hey, this is what I am. This is who I am. This is what I am. This is how I feel. This is like, I can open now. And I'm certainly a very different person, this Jupiter in Cancer transit than I was then. So it was incredible. It was such a full circle moment. Yeah. Thank you for that, Eliza.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. I was not there in person, but I love hearing about it. And all that I saw looked glorious. And it seems, it really, everything, all of the words you used, they were like all the keywords you've been using to describe Jupiter in Cancer, like the soul nourishing, the collective care, the just, befriending people in line. We didn't say that specifically, but that feels really of the same spirit of just like, giving people the benefit of the doubt, and like, just being able to come together, especially at a time, like you say, when the world is on fire, we may be entering World War III, all of those things.
Yeah, all of it. And it was a testament to being like, okay, all of that stuff is happening and it's real, and we do everything we can to counter it, and coming together and celebrating what is good is part of countering that. That is, I felt really strongly that that's part of how we fortify ourselves. And it's also, I think, one of the things that I've read about and have been really meditating on is that Jupiter in Cancer's power is of a local quality, because Cancer is a sign that's ruled by the moon, and the moon is our local planet, and it speaks to local life. And so the potency and the power of the luck that Jupiter brings is about it being right here, that you don't have to go really far to get it. It's like, what is here? Who is around us? How can we gather and nurture what's close by?
I love that.
It was like the team
Thea was there.
I popped in for a millisecond. Chani was like holding babies, and I was like, Chani from there?
I literally was holding babies.
Holding babies. multiple movies. It was so Jupiter and Cancer. I couldn't
It
believe it. It
was,
was like a
it was.
temple. It
Yeah.
was. It was
It
like a
was. Oh, that's a
well.
beautiful way to
Do you
say
know what
it.
I mean? Like
Yeah, they
everybody
did.
was coming to drink from the well, and they were all coming to like pay homage, but also be in community, but also have this exchange and meet people. And y'all, it was so hot, and that
It
did
was
not
so
deter
hot.
people.
It
People were
didn't.
so happy. But no, huge shout out to the team.
Yeah, huge shout out to the team.
Like, and also, like, Eliza and I have been here from, one of the beginning moments, and so it was, like, also too, like, I think there's just seeing how much, like, this is an app, right? But then it gets to, like, be embodied and be felt and be interacted with, and there was, like, a Wheel of Fortune and a photo booth, and it was incredible to just, like, be like, "It exists in the world." And
Yeah.
I agree with that. Sometimes you can get far away from that, but it was incredible to experience it.
So Thea, how is your solstice and first few weeks of Jupiter in Cancer?
It was really cute. I mean, like, also as an astrologer, completely, totally looking forward to Jupiter and Cancer. Just having lived this long, like a year with both benefics, just so maltreated and I was like, "Ooh, where's the well? Where's the replenishment?" And one of the things I did not elect this or plan this, but I was like, "I think I want to take an astrology class. I think I want to be a student again." And that was something that my class started for like mundane astrology. So sort of what we do here. It's the branch of astrology where you're doing events, it's like episodic, it's historical, looking at charts of nations and leaders. And that's felt like so fun. Like I love
Mm,
being a student. There's only like 9 people in there. So it's like it feels
Ooh.
really nice. Like I like a
mm,
cozy little learning setting.
Mhm.
mm.
Um, and yeah, so that's kind of feels very Jupiterian if you're talking about like teachers and learning and studying. I don't know where this extra time is coming from, and I feel a little bit like a delinquent, but I can speed read. I can speed read. It's okay.
I mean,
After
I
looking,
remember when we started at like here together, you were fully taking a very intensive course, maybe for the first year or two. I don't know how
I mean,
long.
I
I
was
just
Maybe
feel
the
taking
like
whole
Thea,
thing.
you're always taking a very intensive course or going on a writing retreat or like you're the forever. I mean, we all are, but you're like the forever student. Eliza, you too. You the
yeah.
first like year or two you were here, you were like, oh, I'm taking 15 like super intense astrology classes from the most heady men on the face of the
And a woman, a very
earth.
heady woman, also
Okay,
named
okay, okay.
Griffin.
Great, 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 great. Yep.
Oh, that's very true.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's felt very like, yeah, I don't know.
Good.
It's
Have you learned
it's a nice
anything
place.
that you want to bring here?
I have I was recently started working with Aries ingress charts, and
Mm.
maybe just I'll take a chance and nerd out for a little bit,
Mhm.
but like
Mhm.
every time that the sun moves into the sign of Aries, that's the
Mhm.
vernal equinox, that's
Mhm.
0 Aries. And if
That's
you
important.
it's important. It's the astrological new year, as we've said for many, many times. But when you look at the chart of a nation, for a solar Aries ingress, you can get a lot about what that country's or nation's astrological year is going to look like. So
Mhm.
then, what I looked at some charts of countries that are in the news at the moment, and one of the most stunning. I mean, a lot of them they're really telling if you look at the Aries ingress charts for both United States, Israel, but I looked at it for Iran, so it's set for Tehran for 2025 Aries ingress, and it has the ascendant at 20 degrees of Cancer,
God
and
help
Mars
us.
is exactly on the ascendant. And of course, it's today, I think you already said the date, but it's June 24th. And this is just a couple days after, 4 days, when was the day that the US bombed Iran after following weeks that Israel has been bombing Iran. And so we know that Mars is the planet of war, Cancer is the sign um, of home, of shelter, of care, of safety. And so for this to be the Aries ingress chart, it's also ruling the 10th, which I think is very significant.
Like the
The
public
10th,
identity.
exactly, public identity, also who's in charge, who's leading. So it was really it's a Mars that's got a big job in this chart, and it's right on the ascendant, and so there is something, the other thing that you wanna pay attention to, by the way, is also the angles, like, really
Mhm.
important. So, like, that midheaven right there between Mercury and Venus. If I'm Iran, that's almost really telling about, um, this, ceasefire, this being implicated between the US and Israel. So there's a lot here.
You know what I think is also interesting about Venus being up there is that there's this whole thing about the I think it's both Israel and the United States. I've just seen a lot of discourse online about being like, do not talk about how repressed women are in Iran when we literally have kept a woman alive as a incubator for the baby that was growing inside of her due to, anti-abortion legislation laws. We, punish women in this country sometimes by death because we
Mhm.
will not let them have an abortion. So I think it's interesting that like the Venus of it all is there when that's, it's trying to be like one of the propaganda points. And it's a complicated thing to say because I'm also not saying that like there's a long standing history of women in Iran doing incredible advocacy, doing incredible organizing, doing incredible activism, and actively, pushing back against the regime that they are under. So
Mhm.
all of that has to be held with a lot of nuance, but I think it's interesting that like they're trying to be like used by genocidal maniacs that are trying to bomb everybody and ruin the entire country world by
The
using that.
Earth.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
one talking
that's
point.
it. Yeah, I agree with the that. Also, too, there does feel something between like the midheaven being there and about propaganda, and about storytelling. Just with that
Mercury.
retrograde Mercury and Venus
Uh-huh.
together, so high in the chart. Um, and I know we'll probably get into this later in the episode in terms of like what is actually happening in the Hall of Mirrors in terms of I'm like, what news sources do I follow about like what is actually happening? Um, it just feels like that this is also playing, like, a really big part in terms of the information story and the
Mm-hmm.
storytelling.
I
Mm-hmm.
think too, like it's so I was taken, Chani, when you're describing exactly that. Like there's this, movement, this liberation movement for women in Iran, but also it's true this is an extremely oppressive regime for women in Iran, and the fact that Venus in this chart is in detriment, it is retrograde. It's also very public facing. So like that seems to be kind of um like Venus is in exile. It's not in a place that's friendly to it. That seems very literal in that context, but also to what you're saying, Thea, with we both Venus and Mercury are retrograde. This was that time of year where the astrology was really not um amazing in terms of what was going on, and they're both at the pinnacle of the chart, and we've seen so many reversals. We've seen so many baits and switches, or like we're going to take 2 weeks to decide what to do and then bomb you a couple days later, or there is a ceasefire before, like Trump announcing that there was a ceasefire before Iran or Israel had publicly acknowledged that, and then like missiles being fired into that ceasefire anyway. It is like I also feel a bit dizzy with it all, and not only what resources are true, which is a valid question, but also what is even going on. Like you have people in power who are just tweeting out information or posting information willy-nilly, and like we know that they don't necessarily fact check. I mean, they're not interested in facts. They're not interested in what's real. And I find it's very distorted. Like what's actually happening, you have to really work to patch that together, which feels somehow indicative of this retrograde
You're
soup
saying like
as well.
Venus as a planet of peace or of justice in a way, it being detriment and retrograde?
I was speaking about Venus more for like, you know, women in Iran, they're not, by and large, are not living in an environment that's very friendly to them, which is akin, I think, to Venus retrograde in its sign of detriment, Aries. But in terms of the the confusion of information and the saying one thing and then doubling back and taking back your word or violating that word or just intentionally planting ruses, that feels very Mercury retrograde as well. Just like you say one thing and then something else happens, or what is said is not necessarily true.
But I would say that like a Venus retrograde in Aries at the top of the chart does signal some kind of conflict, no?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm
Well,
Thea,
like,
would
there
you
was
say
no
that? Would
deal.
your
Yeah,
yeah.
because I think Venus in a nation's chart is like also to in addition to culture and women's stuff. It's like it can be like, do we have an agreement here? Do we have a deal? And we
Yeah.
know that that
Like
was
is
like
there peace?
churning. Yeah, is there peace?
Yeah.
That was like churning in the background for weeks, um, previous to this moment of like trying to get a deal on the table in terms of um I don't know. I feel so even weird segue about saying weapons of mass destruction because I feel like I'm
Oh
living in
God. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
like
Yeah.
2001, like traumatized millennial. Like I just feel
Yeah.
like we're just like here again. Um,
Well, we
mm,
are. That's
okay,
the whole point.
s- can't even. But yes, the no deal, um, the no agreement, the no peace. And also, I just want to say, too, like it's important to point out. I think for Aries ingress, it's like Venus can only be so far away from the sun, so do you know what I mean? And then, like, Mercury is only gonna be so far away from the sun, so there aren't that many
Right, right, right,
options,
right. That's a
but
good point. That's a good point.
it's still really telling that they're
Mhm.
at the midheaven, and that's why the angles are important because the midheaven is saying, "No,
Mhm.
pay attention to
Right.
where they are."
This is a
And
hot
so
spot.
I just wanna emphasize that for everybody
And both
who's
Yeah.
wondering.
retrograde. They're not going to be
Yeah,
retrograde every
exactly.
time.
Well, and can we say that as this is, imploding, exploding, all the things, like Jupiter has moved into the first house and Saturn and Neptune are right up at that angle. They're not quite there, but they're
Yeah.
really fucking close. So this happens
Yes.
as Saturn and Neptune have ingressed into Aries and are hanging out very close to each other around that Aries ingress point. It's not exact, but next year it will be. Anywho, so that's also like up in the public domain of this chart as well as this is happening. And I do think that there's something really interesting here. I don't want to segue too quickly away from this. Is that anything else you wanted to say about this piece?
No, other than that, I mean, you might be going here, but like this
Hmm.
like transits to this chart, as you say, like these degrees of Aries are going to be really hot degrees um for Iran. Like lunations, like Saturn ingressing, Neptune, like I think it will be very important, which is what you're saying, to pay attention to those degrees.
Yeah. And you brought this up to us, Thea, but there's some really wild telling translations that Ali A. Alomi put out, who is an incredible translator of ancient astrological texts from the Islamic world, and also, by proxy, an amazing astrologer, especially in this realm. He does a lot about, I think, Aries ingress charts too.
So this is from the astrologer um, Ali Alumi. And in one of his newsletters around the time of Saturn's ingress into Aries, he was talking about like what this could predict or how this could play out in the world. So he does a lot of mundane astrology, and he's just like an incredible resource, especially for like the Arabic period. So he's talking about the astrology of Saturn into Aries, and this is from Abu Mashar. And he says, similarly, Aries governs the young and Saturn turns its rays against them. He warns of the arrest, kidnapping, and harm of students and young scholars, which we are already seeing. This will lead to riots and clashes with soldiers. But Saturn in Aries also brings trouble for the ruler, who will be disgraced by whispers and a plot. And his relationship with other rulers will spoil as rumors create rifts. I
One
can
can
also,
hope.
Truly.
Come on, Abu Mashar. But there's a specific piece there about this situation
I have
about
it.
Iran. Yeah.
He says that Janawati was a Persian astrologer. So he was talking
Uh-huh.
about um, the it wasn't called Iran at that time. I don't actually know the year specifically he was writing, but I think in the medieval period. And this astrologer, this Persian astrologer, apparently wrote that when Saturn enters Aries, there will be a managing of strife in the land of the Persians, but stability and concord is undone by mischief makers. So there will be some kind of stability that will be undone by mischief makers. Who might that be referring to? And he also warns of an increased tension and some attempt to ameliorate only for outside interference to make it difficult. He warns of sudden collisions and explosions in camps and unsavory plots intending to bring about war. So that just
Oh my
feels
God.
so on the nose. You sent this newsletter to us, Thea, and when I read it a couple days ago, I was kind of blown away at how literal so many of the so much of what Alomi has called out has actually played out even since he wrote the newsletter, which was a month ago, because Saturn's been in
Yeah.
Aries for about a month now.
He has an amazing ability to like pull out the translations that are very apropos to the time, which is, I love it because I don't love living through it, but I love it because these translations are thousands of years old.
Yeah.
And so they had no idea what life would be like now. And so it's not about it being, what do you call it? What do you call it? What everybody thinks astrology is?
Fear-mongering?
It's not confirmation bias.
Oh, okay.
This is a text that was written in a time before most people wrote anything. And so the fact that over the course of this, like we're talking right now about the attacks, on Iran, we're talking about the US joining them, we're talking about an apparent ceasefire. Who knows if it's a ceasefire when you're dealing with men that just cannot get enough blood on their hands. And before this is another really eerie translation from Ali A. Olomi, which he put out, I think, right when Jupiter went into Cancer. So if we want to think about the weekend of the No Kings protest as being a very important moment astrologically, and this is why. It's the third and last time that Saturn and Jupiter are making what we call its opening square. So when Saturn and Jupiter do anything to each other, it's also another signification astrologically that the ancients would have hearkened towards. So they used a lot of these different techniques to look at kind of like world events and world history, because again, we didn't know about Uranus, we didn't know from Neptune, we didn't know from Pluto. And so the last, planet that we had was Saturn. And so when Saturn and Jupiter were making moves with each other, it was really important because they were the slowest moving planets that we knew of, meaning they were kind of like controlling bigger epochs of time, we could say. It's like one of the ways in which you could see what was happening for the world as an astrologer is you'd look to Jupiter and Saturn. So Jupiter and Saturn came together in December of 2020 for the Great Conjunction. And this is the last of what we call the opening square. So it's a point of crisis. It's a point of growth. It's a point of major energy and activation. So we know that whatever happens during the Jupiter-Saturn square, which happened on June 15th, 14th, 15th, think of that weekend, was a big effing deal. And Jupiter being in Cancer was like a signifier of something good struggling against the Saturn and Aries being something very warmongery. So this is what Abu Mashar says about Jupiter in Cancer. Jupiter indicates justice and truth. Corruption is exposed. The rise of the righteous against kings. We had a no kings national movement, but actually global. I think that actually went global. Yeah. So righteous against kings, and the emergence of a powerful and commanding ruler. There is corruption and destruction of the rule of Islamic lands. So that's from Jupiter in Cancer too. And you start to be like, well, did they say that about everything? But anyways, that's also about Jupiter in Cancer. Jupiter in Cancer is a time of riots, which I never would put Jupiter in Cancer with a time of riots. So it's really interesting when you go back into these like ancient texts and see what they were saying. The growing power of the local. This is what I want to underscore for us. I want to underscore this in major ways, because when we say as astrologers that we're hanging on to Jupiter and Cancer, this is, from an ancient perspective, why we would. Because it's not that we're not living in perilous times. It's not that we're not living in dumpster fire. It's not that we're not in extreme conditions, because we are. Literally, we're in extreme heat as we are recording this. But it is about growing the power of the local. Again, why? Because Cancer is a sign that's ruled by the moon, and the moon is our local planet. It's right here. And so if Jupiter brings something good, it's local. With the square with Saturn, so now Abu Mashar is writing about Jupiter square Saturn. With the square with Saturn, which indicates the marching of soldiers. What happened on the weekend of June 14th?
A military parade flop.
Thank you. Military parade flop. Marching of soldiers. We will see the people clash with the armed troops. Why did we have the No Kings protests? Because we had weeks of people in the streets, especially in LA, clashing with armed sociopaths. Sorry, ICE was raiding the city, and then the National Guard National Guard, cops, everything. It's like super armed troops situation. And it's a clash between the people and the armed hand of corrupt rule.
Mic drop. No, it's stunning.
Yeah. And then at the same time, we have, in this moment right now, as we're recording this, a major mayoral race in New York City. And who is seeming to like be neck and neck, if not outranking in the polls, Predator Cuomo, is somebody who is absolutely of the local. Zohran Mamdani is like making absolute history with his campaign, with his like power of the people, with his very like working class agenda take on the city. And it's neck and neck right now. It's incredible. And so we're just going to
really
send,
inspiring.
let's take a
Wait,
minute,
when-
send
When
a
do
lot
you
of
find
good
out?
vibes.
Because
Well,
by the time we
tonight
come
is-
out. Or by
Well,
this
it
comes out.
won't. It'll probably take about a week. So even this episode will be out. We may not know, unless it's like a landslide. And it was a landslide, y'all. I'm just popping back in because the election happened in New York City, and Zohran Mamdani won and Cuomo conceded. And we were out on the streets. We were canvassing. We were helping people get to the polls. We were helping people do ranked choice voting up until the polls closed last night in the incredible heat of climate catastrophe. Like, it's so wild to be in New York right now. We are seeding something here. And it happened on the Jupiter Cazimi. I can't even, okay, I'm going to try to calm down so I can explain this. On the 24th of June, there was one of the most significantly good astrological moments that we have in 2025. Okay, if we look at the landscape of the year, there are 3 days that have just so much good in them. One of them is June 24th. The other is June 25th. So on June 24th, the signification of a swell of people, regular, degular, everyday people, joining forces to combat corruption in one of the most influential cities in the world. People coming together to stand up to fascism, to move in a direction away from status quo, which goes ever increasingly towards the right. This city, it has a tremendous amount of money and wealth inequality, voted for a democratic socialist candidate. It is mind-blowing. What happens here ripples out not only to the rest of the country, but to the rest of the world. I'm not trying to overemphasize American politics, but obviously we are the instigators of some really heinous happenings on this planet. And so when good things happen here, it's a signal of resistance. And what New York City did last night was we came together. So when I talk about in this episode, Jupiter in Cancer being a signification of the local, and the local being the most powerful thing that we have access to right now. And yesterday, as Jupiter and the Sun came together to start a whole new Jupiter cycle, meaning this is the origin point. This is the beginning. This is just the beginning. This is not the peak. This is the beginning of something. And Jupiter is a planet of faith and belief and abundance. And in Cancer, it is about caring for those that are vulnerable in capitalism, in extreme corporate capitalism like we live in New York City. That is about saying, what if buses were free? Which is what Mamdani ran on. What if we had city-run grocery stores, food feeding people? Literally, that's what Cancer does. It feeds, nourishes, hydrates. What if we had rent control? Cancer's literally about home. So as soon as Jupiter goes into Cancer, you could feel this, you could see this swell of support for what Mamdani was running on. Also, they ran together. There was a group of candidates that ran together against Cuomo. So it wasn't even just about the one person. It was about how folks were supporting each other as a party, coming together. The power of the local, the power of each other, coming together. The opposition might have all of the money, and that's nothing to deny or to take for granted. But we have the people, and that's where the power is. And this is what we have to work with. It has seeded so much hope in a nation that has been decimated by just devastation after devastation, of being dragged into wars and genocides that we are actively paying for, being forced to pay for, that we do not want to be in. And last night was a signal that something else is happening. Last night was a sparkling, effervescent light in the dark. And I hope it fuels us in this next chapter of our fight, both in New York City, in this country, but in any country, every country the world over, that this is just a little snapshot of a microcosm of what's going on everywhere. What's happening underneath the surface is that we are remembering that we are more powerful together than any and every billionaire on the planet, and any and every extractive system that wants to dehumanize us and devalue us and reduce us down to our parts. This is a beginning. This is a seed that has planted, that has so much potential for not only this moment, not only this year, not only this whatever election cycle you're in, but for the future. I don't mean to overstate it, but in times as bleak as the ones we live in, these moments sparkle with possibility. And that's where I want us to stay. I want us to stay in what is possible, not in what has already happened, even though what happened last night was phenomenal. But what this moment is signaling to us, like, yeah, remember, it's possible. Everything is possible. We could save everything that is here to save. Everything is possible. Everything. Okay, back to the episode. But I just think that's where we need to focus, right? Like wherever you are in the world when you're listening to this, no matter what kind of scarcity, which I think is very Saturn and Aries, is upon us because of the billionaires and the ruling class and all of the systems we live within, we have to remember that we are the swell. And that's what we saw in the United States, and we saw it in other places in the world over the course of that Jupiter-Saturn square, was the swell of people. There were thousands of protests across this country, making you think, who the fuck voted for this man if all these people are now against him?
Mm-hmm.
I still wonder.
And I think two things are very interesting and kind of like heartbreaking. A of all, in terms of like things happening in Cancer, like, you know, Jupiter goes into Cancer. It's not that everything is good. It's that anything in Cancer is also magnified. So if we look at the chart, the ingress chart for Iran, then we've got Jupiter going into its first house, kind of magnifying something about the country's identity. Perhaps you could maybe say that. But, and also when the LA fires broke out, Mars was in Cancer. It moved eventually into, or it was in Leo, moved back into Cancer, and then hung out in Cancer. And so, you know, I was hoping that when Jupiter went into Cancer, it would be good for the city. But the eerie thing was that as soon as Jupiter moved into Cancer, we had all of these just horrific ice raids across the city, and the city started to react and push back. So I was like, oh, interesting. And then I found this literature being about like the power of the local and the protests and the coming up against armed soldiers and all of that. And it was like, whoa, that is wild for that to have been the signature that literally sparked this huge thing that happened over the course of the Jupiter-Saturn exact square.
I mean, it's true. It's like with a modern astrology brain, it's not obvious that Jupiter in Cancer could bring riots. But if you think about what riots are, you know, that's probably that's a negative word also for just protests. That is people who are coming together because their hope
and it
is
wasn't
strong
riots.
enough for something different.
It
No, indeed.
was
But that's just what
protests,
the quote said. That's what.
And I'm not
Adam
against
shares.
riots, just to be clear.
But in any case, I think they were the people who came out were were way more peaceful than I think what the media chose to highlight often. They showed like the clickbaity.
Yeah. And the emphasis really was on families. Like it was about families being broken up, families being split up, families being deported. These are our neighbors. This is our local life. This is our city. This is my neighborhood. You're coming for my fucking neighbor. He's been here for 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
You're coming for somebody's graduation. You're going to high school graduation.
High school
You
graduation.
absolute sociopathic bully cowards. Like, who are you? How do you sleep at night? Like, you're attacking children. You're separating, you know, it's like that whole thing is back again. But, and
The misuse
also
of
for
power
Jupiter being in Cancer.
is really stunning. Like the misuse of, like, when, just to dissect it too, with Trump calling in the National Guard and usurping Gavin Newsom's autonomy as governor of California, it was like, I think, really unprecedented because most of the time governors have the ability to call the National Guard, and said this was Trump saying, and was even knowing that, like, like the governor thought it was a bad idea. Like, we've got this under control. He said, don't do it. You're going to make it worse. Right. So, like, also to Abu Mushar's quote about like the misuse of power, or like of military force in particular.
Yeah. I was like, wow. And also Gavin Newsom is in his second Saturn return. He has Saturn in Aries.
Interesting. Well, and we've been waiting this whole time for someone to fucking stand up to this guy, to Trump. And it seems like, I mean, you got it. I don't know enough about California politics or Gavin Newsom to say very much. And I'm not necessarily all the
I disagree
horns.
with Newsom on a lot of things, but if you want to run for president one day, which obviously he does, and therefore you want to use Trump as your like entry point because you're going to stand up to him and you're going to like not be bullied by him, fine, go ahead. Like, I'll take what's good about that.
Well,
I'm not
yeah,
gonna
and
vote
I
for
think
you, but great.
if you have the president threatening to arrest you, I think you're probably doing something right. So I think we can give him that. And I hope
absolutely.
And I think too, for the people in LA and all across the country, with people who showed up, the millions and millions of people who showed up for the No Kings protest, we haven't had that kind of show of defiance since he's been elected, at least not to that scale, to my knowledge.
This recent time. I mean, the uprisings of 2020 were certainly
I'm talking
bigger,
about this
but
administration.
But that was under his administration too.
Yeah.
right? Like that giant. So the Women's March was like massive. Then the uprisings of 2020 were massive. And then this massive, that's all under him.
But I'm just referring to since he's been elected again, because it
I
seemed
know.
like there was a real quiet or just like a not navel gazing, but like a figuring out, okay, well, what did we do wrong? And not a lot of actual action. I think people were really caught with the tail between their legs. Or,
Also, we don't
also,
have an opposing
Oh,
political party. Like
that's
I
what I
think
mean.
that's
That's what I'm
too,
talking
like
about.
Democrats, like we're not relying on a political party to counter him because they're completely in shambles and disorganized and in disarray. And so I think that's also too, it's like,
it's like
so
in
this,
walks Zoran.
yes, it has like power to the actual people, like people giving bystander trainings on like what to do when you're in the vicinity of an ice raid, like how to protect your neighbors. Like there is, like, you're so right, like about that sort of coming together. And I feel like Jupiter in Cancer has a real like gathering force, like a real
Mm-hmm.
coalition energy
Mm-hmm.
to it that
Mm-hmm.
allows us to like be with the trouble of the times. Because I think that is really important to say. Like it's there's some that this like the energy right now is like stuff is in peril, systems are melting. It's uh, it's historical, this moment. And so the reason that we're so like looking at Jupiter and Cancer in awe, and then also reading it with like the Abu Mushar lens, I think is like giving us this sort of like, okay, well, what do we do? It's not going to be like escapism. It's got to be, it's here, and it is so local, cities big
Yeah.
and small.
And the way you create those moments, those waves, those tipping points is that you let people know you fucking care about them.
Mm-hmm.
Right? This is why people lose to fascism. It's why parties lose to fascism, because nobody thinks you care. You're not listening. The fascists are really good at pretending they listen. They're really good at making you feel like I see you and I'm angry with you and we're going to go get those bad guys. So the way you like facilitate Jupiter in Cancer, anything in Cancer is about care. So you make people feel cared for. You
Mm-hmm.
say like, yeah, I'm going to make buses free in this city. I'm going to, put a rent freeze, talk about like homes and cancer and, all that sort of stuff. Anyways, not to make it so local to New York, but it's, New York is one of the most powerful cities, if not the most powerful. New York and LA,
Yeah, it's precedent.
obviously it's a very powerful city in this country. This country is a very powerful country. So the mayor of this city is major.
Yeah.
And we're at this moment where like there's a huge groundswell of support for someone who could not be more anti-Trump. And he's up against a literal sexual predator and thief, of the MTA, of the people, of the city itself.
I mean, we know at this point that sexual predation does not disqualify you.
Does not
leading
disqualify.
anything.
It's almost a
like something
barrier
on
to
your
entry if
TV.
you're not. Yeah. So one of the things that I wanted to say amidst all of this is that obviously like the Saturn Jupiter square is a big thing for 2025. But I think I want to just bring us back to a little bit before times when we talked about the astrology of 2025 and we said it was a game-changing year. We said it was a year of a new world order. It's like a new world order. It's new lines being drawn. It's new factions. It's new like little compartments. This is why we were saying it.
Mm-hmm.
Pluto had just moved into Aquarius. Saturn and Neptune just moved into Aries. And Uranus is about to move into Gemini. And I want to boil that all down because those things we could talk about each of them for 17 hours. But I want to boil it all down to this. There's a couple of time frames that I want us to think about because there's overlapping concentric circles with a couple of these planets in different combinations the last time they were in these formations. So the last time that Uranus was in Gemini, it'll be there as of July 7th, but the last time it was there was 1941 to 1948. That's World War II. So on the eve of it moving into Gemini again, everybody's talking about, is this a World War III? So we just want to also see like tonally, what are the echoes that we're in? What rhymes, as Thea would say, with that time, with this time? The time before it was 1858 to 1866, which was the US Civil War. Brutal war. We know some things about it. The time before that was 1774 to 1782, American Revolution, Haitian Revolution, French Revolution. The last time Pluto was in Aquarius was 1778 to 1798. So Pluto and Uranus were in these signs together in the late 1700s. So we know that that's one overlapping concentric circle we've got. Okay, stay with me. Neptune is in Aries. The last time Neptune was in Aries was 1861 to 1875, which overlaps as a concentric circle with one of the times Uranus was in Gemini, which is 1858 to 1866, the US Civil War. So we've got both the Revolutionary Wars happening with two major planets that are in those same signs again. And we've got the Civil War in this country that happens with two major planetary changes. So that means that we're back to this moment. We're on the precipice of this moment. And of course, over this last week, we're all like, is this it? And as astrologers, we're like, is this going to be it? Are we back in war? Because every time since this country's inception that Uranus has been in Gemini, this country has engaged in war or been in its own. So my question is, we can see everyone's talking about civil war within the MAGA party, civil war in this country between MAGA and not. There's that whole conversation that's been going on for a while. There's like revolutionary talk everywhere. And then there's this, world war vibe that we're like, are we at the brink of that? So my question is, we can see the mirroring, but do we have to choose the same outcome again? Do we actually have to choose war again? And what is different about this time than even the last time Uranus was in Gemini? And I just want to say, the United States obviously has Uranus and Gemini in its birth chart. So it's going through its Uranus return. It just went through its Pluto return. Its Pluto return ended in November of 2024 at the beginning of the month, right after the election. So there's a lot of like chickens coming home to roost vibe about this whole situation. But that is my main question. And if we've got Jupiter in Cancer for the next little while, what is the power of the local that we can tap into? We can't stop the, everything from happening, but what can we save? What is the power that we do have? And what did we learn from those times that we can apply now so we don't have to go through that whole horrific thing?
My head's spinning.
Yeah.
It's a lot. It's a lot of parallels.
It's too much to take in as a human.
And I mean, it is deeply troubling. Like, I think we all had those thoughts looking at the astrology for this year. We talked about them in the year ahead forecast that we did. But I think we all looked at those transits, looked at when they last happened and went, that doesn't look great. But I think that, what the question you're posing, Chani, it's an important one. It's a hopeful one. I think with the person who is in charge of one of the most powerful countries on the planet, and just knowing his temperament and his erratic,
the most powerful arsenal, at least, I think we've got at least one of the most powerful weapon toy, sheds, whatever you want to call it.
Like, the cast of characters is not relieving my concerns here, but I would like to think that yes, the power of the local hopefully can override that or usurp that in some ways. And I think we've seen glimpses of that, and I think we just need maybe more of that, not to be overly optimistic, but it seems like
we need all of it all the time.
Yes. Yeah. And the deep irony too here is that he has said several times that he believes he deserves a Nobel Peace Prize, and which is just laughable. Yes, I know, but that indicates that on some level he has some kind of equation where he knows peace is kind of a good thing, like that he hasn't totally miscomputed that. So there's maybe even maybe his vanity can be
used against him.
Yes, yeah, because if he can be fooled into believing that he's actually bringing about peace, if he can actually attempt to move in that direction, which he thinks he is, or at least he seems to be performing like he thinks he is by announcing this ceasefire between Israel and Iran, however successful it turns out to be. But what I will say too, so we talked about World War II in terms of the last time Uranus was in Gemini. Also, correct me if I'm wrong, the creation of Israel. Also,
Yes, exactly. The Nakba.
yes, yeah.
Last time was 1941 to 1949. That was the last time Uranus was in Gemini. World War II and post-war aftermath, when Western Europe carved up the world according to its new world order. This division into parts feels appropriate for Gemini, a sign known for multiplicity. This time period includes Nakba and the 1948 war, though Uranus was in Cancer for part of 1948. Note that World War II facilitated tech advancements, like you're saying, Thea, including the first helicopters, jet engines, electronic computers, as well as the atomic bomb.
Also, I think 1 year shy, but very close. No, not 1 year shy, right around the same time of when NATO was created. And we're
Right.
actually coming up right now we're entering the Neptune opposition from that moment. So when NATO was formed, it had Neptune in Libra, and you have a number of planets in Aries, including the Sun, Venus, and Mars, all within a few degrees together in Aries. And so now you have Neptune entering Aries, and it will eventually hit each of those points, and it will eventually oppose Neptune in the chart. And it just seems like, in some ways, this seems very literal, because Neptune and Libra, what you can think there, Neptune is the planet of idealism in many ways, and Libra is the sign of peace. So this is like really, I'm not saying that Neptune or NATO is, the be all to end all and necessarily forging peace left, right, and center, but I think they came together with peace as an ideal. And I think we're right now seeing, to some extent, the undoing of that, especially when you consider that Trump has already in his term threatened to annex or invade like other NATO countries,
Right.
by which I'm referring to.
Yeah.
Greenland.
And you could think of, like, if you have a whole slew of planets in Aries, if you're listening to this, you're like, I have a whole bunch of planets in Aries. You're definitely going to go through, over the course of the next, decade and a half ish, a softening or a kind of coming undone in terms of like how you've been doing things. Like Neptune is going to erode something about you or your life, like dependent on the planets that you've got in Aries. But and also if this is the chart of an established, organization. So Neptune rolling over, washing over like so much of the chart and its identity and its like moment of inception is saying, well, there's the warning here is that things will be eroded, and what is going to erode it. And also, because this was established the last time Uranus was in Gemini, it's about to begin its Uranus return, and it has the moon in Gemini right next to Uranus. So there's the need for maybe like an update to something, I would say, like, but that does look like, okay, this is a closing of one circle and we're going to reopen in a different way in terms of like, what is freedom? Uranus is a planet of freedom and change and doing things differently and hopefully in a more advanced way, but it is a, destabilizing kind of force. And Uranus will also connect with the midheaven. And so the next 7 years for NATO will be, at least the next 7 years, if not the next, 14, will be a big deal.
And I think we should say too that we're recording this on the first day of the NATO summit at The Hague. So there might be more news that comes out literally even right now as we're recording, and we won't know what it is. So sorry if we seem out of date.
Or we could seem like really good astrologers.
And Neptune opposition is a big deal. Yeah.
TBD.
But also, can I jump in with just like the Pluto opposition? Did you say that already too? Like Pluto in the sky will start to oppose the Pluto in Leo, which is in the NATO inception chart. And we keep saying New World Order. And
everything from this time. Yeah. Everyone from this time, everything from this time. Yeah.
Yeah. So that to me just feels like also really, I'm thinking about NATO and like people like the US and Europe and all the allies being like, okay, we cannot decimate our population, our cities anymore. We cannot do that. Let's form an agreement um, to make sure that like we can avoid this, that we're going to come to each other's aid, but we're really going to not try to war. Because there's something about alliances, you know, the strategy of an alliance is that you're stronger together, and so that's how you avoid war. Um, and so, yeah, so this chart's really interesting to me in terms of the balance between peace and war and the Libra Aries
Yeah, like all
access
that
to.
Aries to
Mhm.
yeah. Because before NATO, there was just so much like everyone was going to war all the time.
Yeah, because World War II had just happened.
And
Yeah.
before that, World
And
War
World War
One.
One.
And
Yeah. So it's catastrophic things back to back.
so I know you've just like cast these brushstrokes that are zooming us out, and we can talk more about the zoomed out of why this is such a banner year and why the world order may be changing. But I also want to just highlight the timing of it all, because 2025 as a whole has all of these major, once in a lifetime or once every couple hundred year ingresses, but we can anticipate when certain things will be kicked off or when there will be flashpoints of what's happening based on some of the faster transits. And I think we really saw that over the last couple of weeks with Mars squaring Uranus at the tail end of Taurus. So we had Mars at the tail end of Leo, finally leaving its shadow after the retrograde, about to enter Virgo, where it is now as we're recording, squaring Uranus. The last time this happened, I don't know if you recall, Chani, I suspect you do, probably you do, Thea. Um, the the skies over New York really darkened with all of these fires from Montreal. That happened again
Yeah, it was
around
here.
the same weekend. We
Yeah,
were
yeah.
in
Yeah.
Montreal. We weren't actually, sorry, I said Montreal. From the fires in Canada, the fires were not in Montreal, but Montreal also had air quality issues. It happened again the same weekend. We were actually, I think the weekend prior to the exact square, we were supposed to stay inside.
So 2 years ago was the last time that Mars squared Uranus.
Yeah, it was 2023, June of 2023 was the last time Mars and Leo specifically squared Uranus. So
Mars
Mars
in
would
Leo,
have
not Mars in
Aquarius. Yeah,
because Mars
but
squared it from Aquarius since then. No.
yeah, but I'm talking about
Okay.
specifically Mars and Leo, because there's something I think extra
Just
inflamed.
wanted to clarify that.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that clarification. There's something extra inflamed about Mars, the planet of heat, literally, and fire and damage in a fire sign. I think its heat becomes less contained, especially when it's squaring a planet of disruption like Uranus. But this also coincided. So that exact square was June 15th, the same day that Jupiter was squaring Saturn. That also coincided with Israel's initial attacks, at least this year, of Iran. So the attacks happened on Friday the 13th at around 3 a.m. They were targeting nuclear scientists and different military commanders and nuclear sites around the country. It included Tehran, which is an enormously densely populated city. I think I might be getting this wrong, but I think it's 10 million people. And to this day, so since June 13th, I believe over 600 people have been killed in Iran. But I just want to go back to the seed moment of this when Israel first sent its missiles on June 13th. Where is Mars in this chart? It's at 27 degrees of Leo. And we don't have right now the charts for the country of Iran or the country of Israel, but I have them in my head, / on a different tab. And Israel was formed as a country on May 14th, 1948. That's the inception of the state of Israel. So we look at the chart of that moment, much like we were talking earlier about charts around Iran. And on that day, Mars was at 28 Leo. So it's coming almost exactly to the same degree. And Iran doesn't have anything at that degree in Leo, but its moon is in Taurus at 28 Taurus. So,
oh my God.
So that's an exact flashpoint in terms of
Ugh.
like Mars just coming right to that point.
It's horrible
Uranus
synastry
in the sky.
Yeah.
And then squaring the moon, which is, literally your physical body, but also your sense of security, even
and
in
also
a
the
country.
people. Yeah.
In Taurus. Yeah, the people, like you say, the local. So that is pretty striking as well. I don't know that we want to go here, but for what it's worth, what felt like very big news at the moment, the breakup between Trump and Musk, they had a very similar mashup of astrology in that Trump's natal Mars is at 26 Leo, right on his
Yeah, I was going to
ascendant.
say that he gets pulled into whatever. But, there's he's part of this whole thing, and he's having his Mars return and Mars on his ascendant.
Yeah, exactly. So his Mars is at 26 Leo. Elon Musk's Mars is at 20 Aquarius, so opposite Trump's Mars. And on the day where they publicly broke up, Mars in the sky was at 23 Leo. So kind of splitting the difference between them and opposing Musk's Mars.
Yeah.
So again, you can see how these major events, they kick off or they come, they come to the surface, they come to blows. There's the explosive moment when a planet like Mars is activating these slower moving planets like Uranus.
That's devastatingly beautiful analysis. Can I jump back to
Please
time circles?
Bring us back to time
concentric
circles, Thea.
time circles that Chani so expertly illustrated us in our time walking from the late 1700s of the revolutionary period of Pluto and Aquarius, Uranus and Gemini, and then how that repeats every 84 years and coincides with US entry into war. And I really like this question of, do we have to do the same thing just because it's already previously
that time again? That time again.
Can we do different? But I think,
can we not men?
Can we not? And I'm meditating right now on Uranus into Gemini, because Gemini likes a question anyway. It likes a little it's a mutable air sign ruled by Mercury, so it's considering and entertaining all the different possibilities. So the question here is if in 1860, Abraham Lincoln is elected president, and the whole thing is that he's really kind of moderate. They don't really know how he's going to go on the issue of slavery, which is the issue at hand, right? And it's all wrapped into states' rights, also Western expansion. As the U.S. expands westward, are these going to be states that are allowed to maintain slavery? And also the in the background, all this is happening with the industrial revolution, sort of railroads, industry. So the North, not that they're more virtuous, they've just invested in industry and railroads and machines. And the South has invested in agricultural industry based on slavery. And so Lincoln really wanted to keep the Union together. That's the whole question. How's he going to go? But he gets elected and 11 states secede from the Union. And by this time, Uranus is already into Gemini. So there's a big question hanging over the country. How are we going to be? How are we going to be free? And what does it mean to be free? And I'm thinking about just that notion of a question, even if you parallel it to World War II, of is the US going to enter the war, or are we going to be behind closed doors supporting Europe in the UK?
Right.
Or are we going to put battleships at sea? Are we going to engage a war? Are we going to put soldiers on the ground? There's a dialogue that's happening, and I can see it kind of paralleling now of what are we going to do? With Uranus, of the planet of, can we get free? Maybe we can redefine what freedom is, and can we choose something that allows people to get free without choosing, I don't know, violence and bombing people and death and murder?
Is the subordination of another. Our freedom isn't
oppression.
Freedom if it's at the cost of other people's freedom.
Yeah.
It's not what it is.
Yeah.
It's just a moment of supremacy, but it'll end. It'll come crashing down at some point.
the other stunning thing about the Civil War is that the Civil War started officially on April 12th, 1861, and Neptune ingressed into Aries the very next day,
Oh
Wow.
my God.
April 13th, 1861. So that's like also
Ugh.
why we're just like, oh,
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
you just feel it and like everything. You hear it. Like it's, people reference it on late night talk shows and the New York Times and like it's just like in the ether.
It's
And so
here.
as astrologers you're like, duh. Also, I just want to say Nick Dagan, I think we've given credit to him before, but Nick Dagan Best has been on the
Uranus.
Uranus and Gemini, like tooting that horn, waving that flag, like flashing that light for a very long time. So again, thank you to the work of all the astrologers that are
We're
studying
all
all this
in
stuff
community with
alongside
them.
us. But everything that we're in makes total sense astrologically. But and it's interesting. Like obviously, every civil war isn't waged when Uranus is in Gemini, but a civil war being also about two different distinct takes on what a country should be and how we should be as a society, and to have both Pluto and Uranus about to be, it's very soon, in humane signs, in signs that are depicted at least by the motif, by the symbols of them as people, like one is the water bearer and one is the twins, that we know that like these two really slow moving planets are in the signs that are about people. And so the world over, we know that there's movement of people, like the ways in which we engage with each other, the ways in which we do technology, the ways in which we do society is undergoing a major transformation. And just to bring it back to the Saturn Jupiter square that we went through on that June 14th, 15th moment, is that when Saturn and Jupiter came together, it was in an air sign for the first time in beginning a 300-year cycle, for the first time in 300 years. It's a brand new cycle in air. And then that's a more like ancient astrological take on things, to know that we're in like this air moment, which again is about a lot of times a lot of change and a lot of destabilization and a lot of movement, and therefore a lot of openings and a lot of possibility for recreation, I think. But again, it's like a lot of shifting, like the air. And then to have, in a more modern astrological sense, these two outer planets that take so long, that really talk about generational moments in humane signs and air signs, but specifically those two that are literally depicted by people, means that there's this like shifting sensibility. There's a different way in which we engage with each other. We're in for a big world update.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, I think, to not be Pollyanna about it and to stay in the opportunity of it. It's time. We're overdue for a change in how we do the world order. Like how we're doing it maybe worked for some reasons for a little while, but it's not working anymore. It doesn't work anymore. Like we're at this very like, edgy place of like, are we going to make it? And so all of these big planetary signatures being like, it's up to y'all. Like you got to change how you're interacting with each other. Like you can't bomb Iran. You can't bomb Palestine. Like that's our family. Like those are our friends and our people. Like I don't know, in a lot of ways, I know maybe this is optimistic, but I feel like we're all too close now. Like this is all too right here.
Air brings things, it shifts the terrain and it brings us all in community. We can like communicate so much easier now and like build relationships over distance, which I feel like in the era where Saturn and Jupiter were making conjunctions in earth signs, like distance was actually like, oh, that's just over there and it doesn't impact me here. And
it's drier.
It's drier. There's a figurehead. Everything is like drawing borders and maps. And now that kind of gets tossed up and we can choose. We can like have real discourse. We can like actually I think that is like opening up a lot of possibility. There's a choice at hand. I like what you said too about them being like quote human signs. Well, they are human signs. They're people as depicted, and so there's something that's like usually pointing to when that happens. Like use your rationale. Like use thoughts. What was that? Wait, can I just say, was that thing you put? Did you post this, Chani, about like have a thought? Don't use ChatGPT.
What it's like, and there's this. I think she's Scottish. I'm sorry if I'm getting that wrong. She's like, whatever happened to having a think?
I think
You just have a think anymore. Everyone's using AI. I just want to have a think.
we can have.
And I also want to say that that idea of the Uranus and Pluto being in humane signs, I think that comes from Kelly Surtees. I read something that she wrote the other day, and I believe that she was talking about that. So I just want to give her credit for that as well. But we want to think about that in terms of like who's representing the signs, and like, if we're in this moment where it's like hefty, one kind of element, then like, what are the symbols that are used for that, and how are they also showing up in the moment? So there is this shifting of like, and I think even in Canada, we saw it, like everyone thought, oh, Canada's going really conservative. And then Trump comes in and bullies. And then Canada is like, wait, there's a shift here. Like, let's reorganize around something. And so it's like that, that's a great template to think about in terms of like how we can shift in these moments. Like things are actually movable, which is unsettling if we want stability, but that's not where we are at.
Yeah. Well, on a bad day, it's chaotic. On a good day, it's possibility, I guess.
On a bad day, it's chaotic evil. On a good day, it's chaotic good.
This feels relevant to mention here. Canada also just signed a defense agreement with Europe. So they are literally, like, alliances literally are shifting. We're literally not looking to America as our savior anymore, because America is, insisting on being a threat.
Diabolical.
Instead. But also what I want to say is like, this is so fascinating to think about the air signs in particular as being signs of reason. But this might be an unpopular question. It's like they're signs of intelligence, but do we assume the intelligence is human? Because I feel like we're entering a time where it's going to be artificial intelligence, and then the next tier of artificial intelligence where they're outwitting us. And we're basically already there. And what is the intelligence that we're relying upon? Is it our own? I'm not sure. And there will be a world order. And will it be
robots?
Will it be robots? Will it be Putin and Netanyahu? Like, I don't know.
And they're robots.
I guess they won't pair up together. That's Trump's doing that.
But yeah, so there was this MIT study that just came out that literally was like, AI atrophies your brain.
Yeah.
The more you use it to think for you, the worse off we're going to get, which I feel like is so the South Node in Virgo, which is just like a loss of an ability to think critically, a loss of facts and data, a loss of words, a loss of an ability to be like, wait, is this an AI generated video that I'm seeing that looks too good to be true or too outrageous? Yes, it is. Like, where is the ability to do that? So get off AI.
And just to think critically in
general. Don't give the robots your ideas. I don't know if that's possible anymore, but yeah.
Even AI to the side, which it's not going to be on the side, but even putting it to one side for now, we're also just like, I feel like education has been dismantled in the US, but also it happened very obviously in the UK while I was living there in terms of higher education institutions. There's no respect for learning. Even like, or reading, I say as an author, but I heard one study, I'm not trying to demonize any generation, but I heard one study that was saying that Gen Z parents are not reading to their kids. It's just like almost a habit we've lost. And I have friends who are teachers, and they're saying that like the youth today are not, I'm probably going to get hate for this, but the youth today are not like as literate when it comes to actually just writing essays or being able to communicate their ideas. And I do think it's because we have, as a society, really leaned on these tools. And I'm not saying these tools can't also help us and even help us to think better, but they can so easily provide a crutch. And I think that can have really devastating impact.
We got such a raw deal. Like, honestly, here's my little devil's advocate to that. If you're a working parent, you like your time is really capitalism has like extracted everything to you, and then you're like, here's the iPad kid. Like, I get it, but we're sold like this raw deal of technology coming in and helping solve a problem that wouldn't exist if there was just like childcare and we paid teachers more. And like, I'm just like, I'm
Common land, farms that we could get food from that we all own.
I send my kids to Waldorf.
Socialism. Yeah. Healthcare. Exactly, Thea. Exactly.
I just feel, yeah. That's all I have to say on that.
I do want to say that in Jupiter and Cancer news, or along Jupiter and Cancer agenda, or just like the vibe of it, I just finished reading Matriarch, which is the book that Beyonce's mom, Tina Knowles, Tina Knowles in and of herself, who gave birth to Beyonce and Solange and is Kelly Rowland's other mom. She wrote this book called Matriarch, which I know she released it before Jupiter went into Cancer, but she has Jupiter in Gemini. So she was going through her Jupiter return when it came out, which I thought is gorgeous. She is a Capricorn queen. I don't know why astro.com doesn't have her birth chart. I couldn't find it on astro.com. So I don't know if her birth time is verified, but I found a Leo rising for her online, which would make sense in terms, she has like very like Leonine kind of features, I think. But if she did have that, it would put it like this whole bundle of Capricorn. She has Mercury and Venus in Capricorn at exact conjunction. And then she's got Sun and Moon almost exact conjunction. So she's born moments before a Capricorn new moon, which also happens to be an eclipse, I believe. And so someone born right before, right on an eclipse is going to have like a very startling life. Things are going to happen to them that feel like very out of the blue and like wild. But she is such a Capricorn queen. And you read that book and you're like, this woman just like worked and 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 just like worked to make everybody's dreams come true. And it's just like, I read it and I thought, oh my God, this is everything that I get as a gift, as a blessing from Beyonce's music is like from this woman. Like There's so much love in it. She's just such a matriarch. She's such a figure of care. Like the ways in which she talks about, demonstrates, does for others, is of service, is, it's like this. And her whole thing is like, not living her life for herself until she was much older, and like the power of really loving herself now that she's older, but also everything she gave up along the way. And just like the determination and the grit and the desire to just like make it happen was so fortifying. I loved the book so much. I also went to Cowboy Carter and I had the experience of getting to see Beyonce in the pouring rain. It was pouring rain in New York City. Let me tell you, people duck walked down a massive Beyonce length stage in the pouring rain. She flew through the air 3 times in the pouring rain. She sang everything, pitch perfect, danced in heels in the pouring rain. Her dancers in the pouring rain, perfection. Everything in that show was so, that show was a spiritual experience for me. Mm-hmm. I was so moved by it. It just felt like I was bathed in love. Like It was so affirming. When she was singing Cozy and she sings about loving herself, it was just like, you could feel it land and what the power of loving yourself actually is in a way that is like regenerative and giving. And I think one of the most beautiful things, as we talked about, she soft launched her chart, her birth time. As we're having the Mars-Pluto opposition, Beyonce's book comes out with her birth certificate in it.
What?
What did I say about Aries and Virgo placements this year? I said big year. She has an Aries rising. And so it's a big year for anybody with major Aries placements. Obviously, she's a Virgo. It's a big year for Virgo placements because of the eclipses that we're having. And the ruler of her ascendant is in her 5th house of children. And so she launches this, the Cowboy Carter tour. She puts her birth certificate out there. We know that her 5th house is like lit up with the ruler of her ascendant, making art, creativity, pursuing all of that, being like a channel for that creative energy, but also children in her life so big. And then, of course, her babies are out on stage with her. And I don't know what it was, but there was something about, maybe it's being a mom, but it's like watching this mother-daughter duo on stage being fully in their own power and fully in their own artistry and fully in their own selves. Watching a teenager want to be with her mom, having them work together, having them make art together, like make history together. Like it was, I don't know, it was so nourishing. It was before I read Matriarch, but I just thought, I felt so, a friend of mine was like, it was so, I was like, it's so generous. And a friend of mine was like, it was so mothering. And it was like, it just felt like I was receiving so much of that, or we were all receiving so much of that care and that nourishment and nurturance. And I don't believe in celebrities, and I don't believe in billionaires, and I don't believe in any of that stuff, but the art is the art. And it's so powerful because it's so imbued with her history, and it's so imbued with her family. It's so imbued with American history. It's so imbued with the history of this nation. And let me tell you, in this time of Neptune and Aries, the Neptune and Aries cycling back, and we're talking about civil wars, and we're talking about this and that. Beyoncé begins and ends her show with a requiem for America. She says, "Goodbye, my old friend."
Oh my God.
You're done. You're dead. It's done. It's time. We did Renaissance. It's like Renaissance and then the funeral, and then Renaissance. She is like, it's it. This needs to be buried. She puts it to bed. Like it is. So on all those levels, it was amazing. And then to read Miss Knowles' book.
I call her Miss Tina too.
Miss Tina was like, just so, I was like, oh, this is where it's from. It's from such a deeply rooted place. I'm not trying to mythologize anybody, but you feel that when it's from your own origin story, when it's from your own roots, when you're doing that deep, like healing work on so many levels that also connects into the country of which inflicted the pain, but that you're in and that you're singing about, and you're wearing the flag and you're singing their requiem.
Wow.
That's my story.
And didn't, just related to that, wasn't there a surprise appearance with Miley Cyrus in Paris when they were performing?
Yes, but I wasn't there, so I don't really care.
But well, I care, and I'm gonna tell you why. Because I think that it's
good for Paris.
I think it's
Paris
relevant.
got everything. Apparently,
I think it's relevant.
Fine. New York, it's fine. We're not mad.
When you have okay, let's just like lay out the landscape here. One of the most famous couples of the year, but let me backtrack, not couples. One of the most talked about friendships of the year was like Musk and Trump. So you have that over here as one example.
Yeah.
And then you have Beyonce and Miley Cyrus, who apparently are actually quite close and on like a regular texting basis. And a lot of their relationship we don't necessarily see because they both try to be relatively private. But these are two female artists, about 12 years apart in age, who are ostensibly supporting each other, close with each other. I looked at both of their charts, and they both have Jupiter and Libra. So they're both 12 years apart, but with Miley Cyrus is Beyonce's Jupiter's return, essentially. And you can see that like uplift of faith, of connection, of beauty, of art, of song. But also she has this beautiful friendship with Dolly Parton. And I just think it's so lovely to hear about all of these maternal or sororal just friendships with like among women artists or mother-daughter, duos. It's to me that's heartening, and it does feel very Jupiter and Cancer.
They also both have Scorpio moons. So anyways, Thea, obviously I thought about you so much reading the book, going to the concert, because
I got a book club it with you. I
know. Oh my God.
From Texas. I got my hair done at their salon.
You did?
Okay, so there's not
at Headliners.
I forget the name of the salon. Yeah,
it's Headliners.
Yeah.
This was
Oh my
early back in the day when she
God.
was still Destiny's Child, so they literally had the dolls at the front.
Oh my God.
No, I'm
And
very
you could just
Houston.
go get an appointment?
Yes.
That's, oh my
And
God.
Solange would bump in and out. People who know me from back in the day, like we all know, we would go to the
Yeah.
parties and Solange is there because
Yeah.
we're like 1 year removed. We're all like,
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
yeah,
I think
yeah.
she's like a year or two younger than me.
Yeah.
But like, I mean, and you talk to anybody from Houston and they're
Yeah.
like, oh, I know Beyonce. She dated my cousin or something. It's like a thing. Everybody wants to claim
Everybody
it.
has a
I get
story.
it. I
Yeah.
get it.
Yeah.
But I'm so moved. I really want to read the book now. And I am so moved about legacy and like
Yeah.
passing on something as a direct transmission and it also being a gift to people. It's just like incredibly generous and just like what I want to see. And it's a force. It's like channeling magic and your ancestors, but it's also right here. And also, you know, Beyonce's so private. Like she's not in there. She's not like giving us all the details of her life, but she's giving us something better. She like saves all her potency for like these feats that you described of like flying in the air and like the artistry. Like, yes, like that's what she's giving us. And so yeah, I'm here for art and sharing and motherhood and transmissions. And
that's
all
what
of
it
that.
was. It was a transmission. And she like, she was also transmuting it and like boiling it down. Then when you read Matriarch, you get a lot of the other parts of the story about what it was like for them in an industry that wanted everyone to be Britney Spears and Christina Aguilera.
I remember that.
And to have
so
these
weird.
these like young, gorgeous, uber talented Black women coming up and then, you know, being styled by their mom and nobody wanted them to look like that. And, you know, everybody wanted them to be blonde white girls. And it was just like all the stuff. And you just hear like they heard the album, they heard like Dangerous in Love and they didn't think it was a hit song. That whole album, the studio was like, oh, there's no hits on this song, on this album. There's no hits on this album. You need to go back into the studio. And there's like, wow. So she's like, when she talks about being underestimated, it's easy to be like, oh, Beyonce, you can't be underestimated. But when you look at it through her mother's eyes, and then of course, when in all the white supremacy of it, you're just like, oh my God. And that was so far down the road. She had already been Destiny's Child. And then she's still being under, obviously. And then it takes until just now for her to get Album of the Year and all the things. So it's a very satisfying book. And it's just, I actually listened to it. So I had her in my ears and it just felt very nurturing and mothering. And I think that's also what I would say about this time with Jupiter and Cancer is like, how can you nourish yourself and mother yourself and borrow from other mothers and, you know, just like bring it in and allow yourself to be held in ways by art or by people who hold space, you know, all of that stuff. It's like we need to remember that's the whole reason why we're here.
Well, I think we've done it.
We've done it.
Oh, we have a question though.
Oh God, the question.
Oh God. You think you're done and it's Ask Me Anything.
Exactly.
So what's our question for this week?
Yeah, our question for this week is, what does it mean if I'm in my Neptune square?
What does it mean? What age are we in our Neptune square?
So everyone is going to get a Neptune square.
Different. Yeah.
Yeah. Approximately like it's 40 to 42. So around those ages. And
it aligns with a Uranus opposition somewhat. Dovetails with it.
I think it's like one of the first midlife, I think.
Crises.
Crisis choices. Disillusionment, confusion. What am I doing? Like kind of reanalyzing like my life. I was doing this based on this story. And now what am I doing? And the crisis that brings us along. It's like really existential, sort of hard to name. And I like this question because there's a new crop of people and there's always a new crop, but like the sign change from Neptune from when it was in Pisces to when it was in Aries, really now shifting it to Cardinal. So all those like 84, 85 babies.
Neptune and Capricorns.
Yes. And it goes longer, but that like 0, 1, 2 degree, like if you have Neptune at those first 2 degrees of
Capricorn, Neptune right now is looking at your birth of Capricorn and be like, so what are you gonna do now? Like, is this what you wanted? I think on a good day, I think Neptune and Capricorn is like with the square from Aries has like a certain nostalgia on it. Like I feel like that's the kind of vibe of this particular square, just because Capricorn is tradition and Neptune is fantasy. Um, it could even be like an obsession with history. Here we go.
Yeah,
I'm
I do think that part of your
You
generate,
noticed
like
it?
there's that like, yeah, an ability to like call back or like want things or like study ancient astrology, even like that
Mhm.
little cohort of being like, wait, what was back there? That was good. Um, I am thinking about my Neptune square, and it did align with a lot of things falling apart in the world. So I did feel very like, why am I doing this? Why am I doing astrology like this? Just like I
Mm.
should be doing something more immediate, more that's going to meet the moment in a way. And like I was really in a, and I do this a lot, or I have done this a lot in my past, but devaluing what I was doing because feeling like that sense of despondency and like, ugh, what is all this worth if everything's on fire kind of thing. And so I would say that if you're in your Neptune square and you do feel that sense of disillusionment, that's part of it. You don't have to believe it what it's saying. It's
Mm.
just like it's a feeling, and that if I would have gone with that more like nihilistic kind of like nothing really matters, that everything's for like nothing that I'm doing here matters because it's not addressing this exact pain point in a specific like you know a head-to-head kind of way. So I would say that if I would have gone down that road, I would have missed the whole point
Mm.
of everything that I began the episode with, and all the experiences that I had this week, and all the really
Yeah.
fulfilling ways in which following your creativity and following the thing that's alive in you is the most important thing. And moments of disillusionment are part of the deal. They're just part of the price
Mm.
of admission.
Yeah.
And so let yourself be disillusioned and let things get kind of like eroded and worn away. But remember that the spark is you cannot buy it, you cannot fake it, you cannot replace it with anything else. That in there in your being, like where you're driven to. And
Hmm.
that being confused is medicine.
Mm.
It's not a bad sign. It's a part of the initiation into your 40s, I think.
That feels right.
Yeah. Do you have anything from like readings you've given people at that age?
I mean, what I've noticed is people, it's not uncommon for people to be, I mean, this is the age where there are a number of so-called midlife transits, like the ones you named, including the Uranus opposition, also the Pluto square. But I have noticed people in
Mhm.
this age range to be in some kind of pivotal pivot, be it changing career, changing relationship, but some kind of reevaluation of life as they know it. And whether because of that disillusionment or maybe that sense like they've lost the plot or they've lost their sense of direction,
Mhm.
there being a reckoning with that feeling of like aimlessness. And that can, I think, create the freedom to make different decisions. So I don't think people have to make huge life changes, but I have seen that happen. I have seen people, for example, leave corporate jobs and then create their own company or
Yeah.
do their own thing, and it actually works out for them. It doesn't work out for everyone, but it's, I think there's something about with the Neptune in particular about following your dreams, and if you don't, they'll
Mm.
gaslight you from behind, or they'll do something, they'll get in your way somehow. I think if you don't listen to that part of you that's a little more idealistic or a little more maybe even in tune with like what you wanted when you were a kid, or what
Mhm.
fed you when you were a kid. I feel like Neptune is in touch with that essence in a way.
I think so too. Like we are going to tell ourselves stories about our lives because it's honestly how we cope. We like to
Yeah.
like I mean like so we have some narrative and it's just like, oh, can we do it better? But this is that moment of kind of reckoning maybe with the story and like what was real, what hasn't been real, what is possible. It does feel like a reckoning, and you're right when you layered it with the Pluto square, just like all this time period, like the midlife kind of outer transits that come about. And so if you have like Neptune angular, you might feel this more. If you have Sun Neptune or Moon Neptune, like I think that those could, some people will feel it to different degrees.
Right.
So you can check your chart on the Chani app and see.
Yeah, and if you have Neptune Sun or Neptune Moon or Neptune with your chart ruler,
Yeah.
that will also like be embroiled in a bigger kind of need to realign with your dreams, need to ride out the waves of disillusionment. It's good to be disillusioned, I think. I think it's good to be disappointed because you had expectations of something that they weren't correct. They weren't aligned. And so it's like a reclaiming of like what you thought that thing was. You were maybe even putting something on someone or something that wasn't supposed to be there. And then you can kind of drop back in and be like, okay, well, how do I want to live out this thing? How do I want to live into this kind of dream or possibility?
I like that framing of it.
Love that. Live your dreams.
Yay. All right, y'all. Well, I guess the next time we come back, we'll be talking about Uranus officially in Gemini. Cue Jekyll,
Yes.
Hyde, tricksters, circus, clowns,
all of that.
all of it.
Sounds good.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.